Hello everyone, welcome to this session. So today we are going to talk about how we can build powerful mobile applications for your startup. So uh, currently, I think most of you have an idea of a startup or a business or even a mobile app that you want to start developing. And what we are trying to do in this session is explain to you how to get started with turning your ideas into a mobile app. So before we start, we need to check what are the things that we need to uh, think about before even starting developing our mobile app. So most of you here or some of you here uh, are technical or learning some technical new technologies. And you heard about, for example, blockchain or AI, and you guys wanted to do something, do a project about it. It's This is a good way of thinking, so choosing the technology first. But if you are thinking about building a startup, it's better to think about the problem first rather than going through the solution. So there is a term for that called SISP, solution in search of a problem. So I guess most of you guys have, for example, heard about um, AI or blockchain or all these trendy words, and you want to do a project with it. But the issue here is that when you define the solution first, without looking at what's the problem, you might end up developing something that is not as scalable as uh, the other way around. And the startups is all about developing something that can grow quickly and grow fast. And I have heard this a lot from some apps that are published in Bahrain. The founders come and say, we realize that we built a mobile app, a native mobile app, and we realized that we needed a website rather than a mobile app. Most of our customers are not going to download our app because uh, it is not as useful as a website for them. Most of them are they are going to use it only once, or they want to take advantage of the SEO features in their websites. So this is the first thing that I think we need to start talking about and mentioning. So don't start with the solution. Start first with the design planning stage. So let's say the business side, the design and planning. Before, when you get the first idea, start working on your business model. And I think most of you maybe from previous sessions have seen and gone through this business model canvas, where it explains everything that defines your project and your product. And I'm going to go through them very quickly just to understand why this is a very important step when building any mobile app for a startup. So first of all, you want to look at your value proposition. So you want to check what makes you different than what's available in the market. So you want your app to succeed. You don't want your app to be a replica of another app that is successful. So what kind of values you want to present to the customers or users that are going to make them download your app? Again, we are talking about mobile apps. In generally, someone who will download a mobile app, it's not a one-time experience. We want him to return back to the app. We want him to use it every day. And if your service is only one-time use, going through a mobile app will be very difficult for uh, for you to grow on, for your users to use their app. They, I guess most of you guys have apps in your phone that you have downloaded, you opened it once, and you never came back to it. So defining your value is a very important thing that you'll understand, and communicating it to the customers, you will make them want to return back to your app. So this is for value proposition. So customer segmentation is also a very important thing. So before even starting your designing phase, you need to define some customer segmentations. What are the people that you want to target with your app? When you try to segment them, and different users have different feelings on different experiences using the app. So let's say university students are much, let's say, closer to technology than older generations. And small kids, if your art is targeting small kids, you need a very different kind of design and UI. So in this case, defining them will be much better for you to uh, do it at the beginning. And this is all, these things are all at this stage guesses most of the time. What you need to do, what we are trying to do is build up this model from the beginning and try to validate it through the versions of your app. So it's better to have a guess now and write it down and filling it with your business model canvas. So when your version one of your app has been launched, you will be able to return back and say, yes, we have delivered this value proposition, or we need to tweak on this point, and we need to enhance it. And probably with your journey, you will be able to redefine, make your business model much more realistic and much more closer to your customer base. So the third thing is the channels, how you want to communicate with your customers, your customer relationships, your revenue, how you will make revenues. I have seen a lot of apps that have been built and went to the market, and after that they were thinking, how can we make money? It was not planned from the beginning. So if you are building a mobile app for the fun of doing a mobile app, it's totally fine. But if you are thinking about startup and building a business, you need to think about how you will make money and how you will monetize your app from the beginning. Um, Key resources, who you will need as a partners and activities, and how much the cost are also things that you will need to decide and at least estimate from the beginning, so you'll understand how you will set your plan. So filling up the business model canvas is a very important step when building any mobile app for a startup. And throughout the journey, you will realize and you will change it a lot, and you might even change the whole business model canvas. And you will encounter some, you will define some things that are, you will discover later on that might not be realistic. However, having this written down is very important for you to return back to it whenever you are developing, whenever you are planning your features and planning your mobile app, because it happens a lot for a lot of people, and that they will start developing and they will forget the purpose of what they are doing at the mid of their development. They can spend a lot of time doing a lot of features that are fancy, that are very nice looking, and they will forget the purpose or, for example, their customer segment that they are working on. This causes them a lot of issues. So yeah, so this for the business side, I think at the beginning, when you get the idea, it's better to have fill in all the whole business plan. So after that, you will define and you will have a clear idea what is your problem, what are the things that we want to do when filling up the business plan. So it comes now the step where you need to at least have some sort of a design, some sort of a visualization of what you have been thinking of. So here comes the design phase. In this phase, you will start building some prototypes. And these prototypes help you create better scope. Like, for example, if you want to create a mobile app for a big mobile app, when you start designing it, you will be able to define, okay, so we can develop these features separately, can develop them as a whole, and you can understand how big is your project. You can estimate from that designs and from these prototypes what are the things that are required from, let's say, third parties. It's very good. It gives you a very good ideas, and there are multiple types of prototypes and uh, multiple types of ways to do that. The first one is the low fidelity prototype. This is something that you might be doing when you start thinking of any idea. You just start sketching, writing down everything and drawing how the app will look. This usually have only boxes, circles, nothing fancy, just to understand how the idea is going to be implemented. And this actually is very important to do this kind of low fidelity prototypes at the beginning of your journey in a startup, because in a lot of, in some cases, like you will have an idea that is not implementable or it's missing some parts. So you will have a better idea how you will implement your mobile app. The next one, so it is going to quickly test the features, as I said, and test the idea. And it will give you a better understanding how you will scale your app. So how you can validate your, uh, let's say, low fidelity prototypes. There are some tools that are used and available online. Some of them are free. There is a tool called, for example, Envision. This tool lets you upload these images and sketches that you have drawn throughout the idea process. And inside the app itself, you can just define areas where I want this to be a button that will redirect it to this page, for example. And with that, you can run it on your phone and you can see how the app and have a better looking and feel very quickly. And you can make very quick adjustments before actually starting to write any code. So the idea here is that you will be able to understand your app before and make changes before developing something and redeveloping the whole feature again after you spent, let's say, a couple of weeks working on it. So this will save you a lot of time, and also it will excite you to develop it. It will give you more ideas that you might be uh, wanting to add, and you might add to your backlog. So the second type of prototype is a high fidelity prototype. Some people skip that step. I don't advise you to skip creating a high fidelity prototype, because what you are going in this high fidelity prototype, you are defining everything, how it will look, almost 90%, and how it will look on the real device. So you will have real pictures, real colors, how you will have the whole look and feel on how your app will be looking. So it's a very important step because changing things in design, it's much easier than changing it in code. So rather than spending a lot of time writing the code and editing and changing things, you can have a fully, let's say, designed app. And from the beginning, you can refer to understand how much the margins, how you lay out your items and everything like that. So yeah, so this is just a comparison like high fidelity prototypes. It's also very good when you at the stage you want to pitch it to your, let's say, your family or friends to get some funding. Maybe you are trying to convince them to add money to your to invest some money into your startup. So rather than starting developing it, you can start with a prototype, high fidelity prototype, and show them the actual app on their phones and how it will look. And you might be able to convince them much better than and a much earlier stage than going through developing the whole app. So this concludes the design phase. So now, after you finished designing your app, you want to go and start developing it. There are two main components here when you are talking about mobile apps that not necessarily applicable for all mobile apps, but most of them you will have a backend and a front end. The front end will be the mobile app itself, and the backend will be where you will store your data and database and all these integrations with, let's say, some services. So for a startup, you might not be able to have or have the capability at the beginning to run and have a servers at your, let's say, office or at your home. There are ways where you can manage to get your uh, a backend service without even going through the hassle of managing the service yourself, which is something called mobile backend as a service. And this is like has been introduced in the last few years as a very good solution for beginning startups. So, for example, two major companies that provide these kind of services are Firebase and AWS Amplify. I personally use Firebase a lot in my apps before joining Ella, and it provides you the whole database, and it's all managed by the servers, and everything is managed by uh, Google themselves. So you will be able, and they provide you an SDK. SDK is kind of like a software development kit that you can add to your app, and it will help you connect to this database, connect to the authentication, for example. You want to add features like signing with Google or other social media apps. It provides you the tool that will help you develop these kind of features without going through the hassle of doing it manually. And they have a very good tutorials on that. Another option is from AWS is AWS Amplify. So what will happen here, you will replace your backend with something like Firebase, and um, you will be able to connect to it and get all your data from that. So this is this is useful for apps at the beginning, and especially when you are developing a mobile app or for a startup and you're at the university level, and you will not might not have the capabilities of getting, for example, expensive cloud services. Uh, so I'm showing you this option because I was in university and I wanted to create some apps, and this was something that was stopping me. And discovering this Firebase and these kind of services helped me a lot to develop these apps at that time, and I was able to launch them quickly. Um, but however, we need to understand that they are not as scalable as other options at the other option, but it's the fraction of the price. So there are some things that are uh, you need to go through the traditional way, let's say, of developing the backend. All right, so let's go to the front end, which is the mobile apps themselves. So there are three main mobile apps or types of mobile apps that you need to understand and decide from the beginning which type of apps that you want to choose and start developing with. Uh, Understanding the differences, the answer for which type is better is a very hard question to answer. However, I will try to simplify what are the differences between them because there is no right answer. So I cannot say native applications are better than hybrid applications. It might be that your business needs and your startup needs will prefer hybrid application uh, as it will be low cost and all these kind of things that I will explain now. So the first thing are native apps. So native apps are actually apps that are developed in the way that the manufacturer or the let's say the company that owns the system, operating system, wants you to do it. For example, in Android, Android have developed all these tools. For example, something called Android Studio as an IDE for you to develop your apps. And they are using languages like Java for Android and Kotlin. Now they are shifting to Kotlin. And with this approach, you are able to get and receive updates from Google themselves, the owner of Android. and you will have much more resources, official resources from these companies. Uh, Another point here that native applications are much easier to support new versions of Android and um, are much easier to connect with things that we call OEMs, things like the sensors on your phone. Um, let's say you want to develop an app that take pictures, accessing the camera from a native code is much easier and much more, let's say, developed correctly through, can develop it correctly from native applications. Second option is going through a hybrid mobile application. So this would usually be that you are developing an web application and there are some tools that, so you are using the same HTML, CSS, and JavaScript languages. And there are some tools that will convert this code into a mobile app. This is a good option for someone who been developing and learned how to develop mobile app, websites and want to switch to developing mobile apps. And there are things like Apache Cordova, Ionic, that is very popular now in the market, where you can integrate them and learn them very quickly if you already know how to do web development. However, if you are at the beginning, you probably you don't know anything about developing websites. It might not be the best option for you. In this case, you might want to learn cross-platform development. Uh, Cross-platform apps are apps that are written in uh, frameworks and in one source code, they have only one source code and they can build your code into two different platforms or more. So these frameworks are not specific, has not been developed or specifically developed for one platform. They are developed from the beginning with the idea that it will be um, distributed through different platforms. So two of the popular frameworks that provide this kind of solution is Flutter and React Native. The difference between Flutter and React Native here is that Flutter has been developed as a mobile app uh, in mind. So they started as a mobile app framework, and then they shifted to become a web framework, and they provided other frameworks later on. And the other way around, React Native started as a React framework for web, and then they shifted back to developing making their their framework available on mobile applications. So to to summarize all of that, I have set a small table here. So in native, you will have two different code bases. So basically two different technologies, two different languages, and uh, you will have to consider both applications are two separate applications. Hybrid, you will have, and cross-platform applications, you will have one single code base. Uh, the pros of doing a native application is that you can have high performance, full access to the OS services, features, and you will have native UI that can be updated with the OS itself. For example, here, push notifications. You can see that in Android 12, it has been updated. So you don't need to do this update or wait for your framework, like in hybrid or cross-platform, to be updated. It can be updated with the framework by itself. And hybrid applications, you will have multiple OS supports. You will have some, let's say, customization capabilities that are not available right now in the framework. You might face a lot of issues with compatibilities with some devices that was not tested, let's say, on this framework. These kind of issues are you might going to face in hybrid. In cross-platform, you have actually the best of both worlds. You have one code base, and you still have better access to device features. You will have better access to like for example, in Flutter, you will be able to access or write some code if it's not available in the framework itself, to write the code in native and connect it to your Flutter framework. This can give you a lot of possibilities to not be limited by uh, one framework uh, and or the framework updates. Uh, the cons here that native, you will need to manage two different code bases. You will need to have knowledge in both Android and iOS, or you might need to ask your friend to join you, and he might be developing the iOS side, and you will be developing, let's say, the Android. And two different code bases might show you a lot of issues. Let's say you will have an issue in Android, or and doesn't exist in iOS, or something has been developed quickly, faster in Android, and was not developed yet in iOS, because iOS developer might need more time maybe to develop it. So this kind of issues exist in native, and it's usually require much more cost because of that. You will need two different teams, or let's say two different groups of developers. And it's also a lot of time. It takes a lot of time for developing more than hybrid and cross-platform. Again, because of the separated code bases. In hybrid, here you will have, and cross-platform also, you will have a much better cost-effective approach, because you will have one code base that you will be able to distribute to both platforms at the end. So you will develop one feature on the same, let's say, with the same code, and you will give it to Android and iOS at the same time. Um, and the only problems here with hybrid and cross-platform is that there are some limitations that or some issues that might not be shown at the beginning. You might run into them while doing your testing, let's say, on different devices. However, this approach can save you some time at the beginning, since your goal also as a startup to grow quickly. And to achieve that goal, you might need to choose cross-platform and hybrid applications for that. Going through the hybrid also, the way that the app actually being built is using the browser, which is also something that cause a little bit, you can notice some apps in the App Store right now that they don't feel or they don't perform the same way as an app that is being rendered or built using a native way. So this kind of feeling makes you feel that you can tell that this is a website or a hybrid application. So this kind of low quality makes a lot of people avoid hybrid application. But having the cross-platform option here makes a huge difference in that side. So the cross-platform, you still develop it in, let's say, in Flutter and Dart. It's a different language than the native one, which is Java for Android, for example. However, what the cross-platform will do is that it will try to generate this Dart code into a machine language code, which will make it look or works like a native application. So now that you have chosen how you will do, which approach you will choose for your startup or your app, you will start developing your version 1.0. In this version, your aim here is to validate your hypothesis that you have been set in the beginning at the business model. So a big issue that I see a lot with a lot of the developers or a lot of startups for mobile applications, that they want everything to be done in version 1.0. And this can be very hard to be done, as everything you have written in your business model is not an actual fact. It's just an assumption that you want to validate. So in version 1.0, you try to give the minimum amount of features, the minimum amount of changes you want to do in order for you to develop it quickly, give it to the customers, and then understand what need to be changed, understand if your assumptions are correct or wrong from the beginning, rather than wasting, let's say, 5 or sometimes 3 years developing a mobile app that at the end customers don't want to use and you have to shift. So the approach here and the advice here also is to not love your version 1.0. You will always have to hate it, since you will need to develop it really quickly. And I have two examples. One example is a streaming service that is one, I think the most popular streaming service right now is Twitch. Uh, Currently, it's $1 billion company, and it's if you have ever used it, it's very nice, and it looks like it has been developed very in a very sophisticated way. The thing is that at the beginning, and the version 1.0 was like this. It was called Justin TV, and it was only one channel, uh, low resolution video, nothing about video games. And it was about this guy who's called Justin, that is, and he's streaming his life. Um, and it looks like it was being developed by, let's say, uh, someone who is still learning how to code. But he was able to take this project and this startup from Justin.tv and throughout the versions that I have developed into what Twitch is like now. Another example is Facebook. And I found this picture of the old Facebook. It was called the Facebook also. Um, it has gone through a lot of changes throughout the years to reach what it is right now. So when you start thinking of developing your app, you need to think of your version one as might be your worst version, and it's just to validate. You make sure to you want to validate your customers, um, and validate your assumptions. So this is the mindset that you need to have when developing your startup. So this is how Facebook looks like now. It looks more organized. It has much more features, and it's it has gone through a lot of changes. And this is what you need to do. This is what you need to try. The kind of approach you want to follow when you're developing your startup. So after developing your version 1.0, uh, you need uh, you want to publish your app. So for that, you will probably choose Google Play Store and App Store. And to be able to publish an app, you need a developer account. To create a developer account for Google App Play Store, you will need to pay a fee of $25 for a one-time fee for $25. And for App Store, you will need to pay a yearly fee for $100. So this is something that I got a lot of questions in, so I wanted to add it to the slides here. And yes, thank you all for listening.